children. So, anyway.
I mean, magical too.
Yes. Welcome into Coffee Conversations. My name is Josh.
I'm Anna.
And we're glad that you're here to talk about this past Sunday's message. So this past Sunday, we were entirely online.
It's true.
Which was fun because one of our sound guys, Lewis, owns a production company, and he comes in and makes it awesome. Shout out, Lewis.
Woo! Yeah.
He does a great job and makes me feel super professional because I'm staring right at it's like him and a camera, and he's just like going along with it. I'm like, yeah, man, awesome.
Yeah.
So this past Sunday, we talked about Blessed Assurance.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I love that hymn. I'm so glad you talked about it.
You know what? I didn't really know that song super well as I was growing up in church. We didn't really sing that one a lot. At least in the type of church I grew up in. And as I migrated more into the Baptist world, I learned more that everybody else loves that song, so I better learn it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. It's a fun one.
It's a good one. It is.
What? So why is it? It sounds like it's one of your favorites.
Probably, yeah. Maybe because I'm so familiar with it. I think it's one of the ones that we had to memorize when I was in children's choirs. So you memorize the first and the third verse.
Not the second.
Not the second, no. Beth made sure that we memorized first and third, my mom. But yeah, I love the chorus that says, like, this is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. And
I've always loved that part.
Yes. Yeah. I just think that that's, like, if the gospel is true in my life, then this is my story. It changes my story. It changes the way that I think about life, like the way that you were speaking about. Like, this should be a part of what my story is, that Jesus died on the cross, and that changes the way that I see life and the way that I live my life.
I think that has to be central to the way a Christian lives. Like,
yes.
I worry sometimes just for some of the kids who've grown up in youth groups that I have led, or in churches now that I've led. I worry sometimes for those whose faith is simply a Sunday thing or a when I get together with my people sort of thing.
Yes.
And because what tends to happen is, because it's not central to their life, usually something else good is, like family or work, but it's not Jesus. And because Jesus is not central to their life, they have, in my opinion, a lot of times less hope in the end. And they don't tend to view life through this lens of Jesus. And I think when you can view everything through the lens of Jesus and what Jesus has done, and by extension the hope we have,
right,
I think life just seems a little bit, I don't know, lighter.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it might not change like what's happening in life, but it's going to change my perspective and change the way that I react to things when Jesus is the king, like what you've talked about before too.
Right. So we talked about a few things, and I know you always take notes.
I do take notes.
So what?
So good.
What stood out to you, or maybe is there something else like maybe I can talk about a little bit deeper or more eloquently? I don't know.
Yeah, I want to hear more about, like, I loved the you never doubt in the dark what you knew to be true in the light. And just if you want to talk more about that and where you heard that, and just I just thought that was so profound. Like, I'm going to write that down and look at it all the time.
So my one of my pastors in my first church that I was a youth pastor in, a volunteer youth pastor. Totally volunteer. And his name was Steve Oates, and he is still to this day teaching me things, things that I remember he said years ago that still stay with me. And I go, man, that guy was smart. So smart. He's passed away, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, but I wish I could call him. He's one of those guys you wish you could call, because he had these wise sayings.
Yeah.
And one of them was, never doubt in the dark what you knew to be true in the light. And when he was telling me about it, we'd been walking through some pretty tough stuff. And I was in college or seminary at the time and really diving deep into theology. And it seemed at the time, especially because of the effects and influence of postmodernism on like theological stuff of the day, making its way into churches and into seminary classrooms. And then likewise amongst the relationships you have there.
Right.
I remember just really struggling with like what's right and how do we know? And thinking through a lot of that. And he wisely sat down with me at, I think it was La Fiesta, because it was his favorite restaurant. It's the only one he ever wanted to eat at. And we're talking one day, and he says, let me tell you a story. And he says, one time I used to get up early, and I didn't like it. And he said, I really didn't like it because I would have to get up and walk in the dark, so I didn't turn on the lights and wake everybody up. My kids would be up, and my wife would be up. And he said, one morning I psyched myself out. He said, I knew where the layout of everything was in my house, but for whatever reason, I thought we had moved something, like the coffee table, a little bit to the left or a little to the right, because we'd had some people over or something like that. I thought we'd moved everything, and I psyched myself out, and I was afraid. And so as I'm thinking all this, I'm trying to avoid the coffee table in the dark. And he says, and then I ran smack dab into it, like hit my knee right on it, fell over on it, big crash. Everybody in the house woke up. He's telling me this story. And then he looks at me and goes, the moral of that story is never doubt in the dark what you knew to be true in the light. He says, when you're around all these other Christians and when you're at church, you know God is true. You know God is real. You know what Jesus has done for you is real. And it's real easy to believe those things. When you go to church camp and you experience the presence of God, like you know those things are real. And then when you get back out there where you're supposed to be the light, and it's a little bit darker seeming, a lot of times it's easy to falter. And so he said, never doubt in the dark what you knew to be true in the light.
I love that because it's so true. It's such a
I live
good
by
reminder.
that myself personally every morning when I get up in the dark.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I know there's not supposed to be anything here. Yeah, it's hard getting up early like that.
I'm impressed. That's why we have coffee.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And magical coffee.
And magical coffee. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's like knowing what you think and knowing what you believe, or at least having a good idea. You can be open-minded about stuff.
Right.
But at least having an idea of what it is you think you believe and why, and being grounded in that, because the world can sometimes get dark.
Right.
And it's not because everybody outside the church is evil. It's just because life is hard.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Life is hard, and it can get dark feeling. And we need to be prepared for like what happens when life does that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a good reminder to, like, if I truly believe in this blessed assurance, is the assurance that Jesus wins, that Jesus is in charge, and to know that, and that so when things don't look the way that I thought they should, or are dark, or are hard, like, I can rest in the assurance of Jesus.
Right.
And do I do that? It was a good reminder, like, hey, like, maybe I need to rest in that more, because it is sure, it is true. Like, that's what we talk about. It's why we're here. That's what we do.
Yes. Well, so let me ask you that. On a normal day or season of life, how big of a role would you say that this assurance that I am made right with God, and that if something were to happen to me, I'd be there with God in the end? How big of a role does that play in your kind of day-to-day Christian life?
Yeah, I want to say it plays a really big role. I think, and it does, but I think a lot of times, like, maybe my first thought is not that, and maybe is I'm a worrier a lot of times, and so I find myself like starting to worry about things or starting to stress about things, and it's when I like take that moment to stop and to really think, like, wait, like, what am I worried about? And to remember all those verses that I've read and known that in Matthew that talk about, like, don't worry about tomorrow, like, set your mind on Christ, like, seek first his kingdom. Like, if I can remember those things, then it's like, oh yeah, like, duh, like, God's got this.
Well, I love that, because that's that old scripture memory stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
It kind of seems out of fashion, but it's so good.
It's so good, yes. And even like hymns like that, or songs that we've sung, like those different ones. Because I thought about too, there's the newer song that uses that too, that's like, I trust in God. To think about, like, if I truly trust in God, he's got this, and I
Right.
can trust in what he's doing because of this assurance of what he's already done.
Right.
And but I think it has to be a daily reminder, because a lot of times, like, my daily thing might be distress, and that's not what it's supposed to be.
Well, and you're not alone. We live in
Right.
an era, I think, where, I mean, we see this, like, where anxiety is high,
Yes, absolutely.
about different things, but just in general, we experience a lot of anxiety in our culture, and especially amongst younger, but even into the older populations.
Right.
Depending on what you're going through in life, we see that there's a lot of anxiety. We see that people are given meds for this, right? And if
Yeah.
you're on meds, like, yeah, take them. Don't hear me say. I'm just saying that's one of the measurables there.
Right.
We see that anxiety is high, and I wonder sometimes if, in the life of a Christian, it might not be really beneficial to think through, man, I've got it good, because no matter what comes my way, I don't have to overly stress about it,
Right.
because I know that God's got me. And that's a daunting task.
Yes.
That's a daunting thing, because anybody can get up and say, hey, man, just trust God.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of it, it's,
Yeah.
I think I can fix this myself.
Yeah.
Or I should, or
yeah.
when's God going to step in? I was talking with an older lady this week who, her son died a few months ago. And she had prayed and prayed and prayed for her son. He had a brain tumor, and she had prayed and prayed and prayed for her son, and he didn't live. And so she's having some trouble thinking through, like, why didn't God heal him? Now, he was 60, but all the same, like, no parent wants to bury their child.
Right.
And she's like, well, why didn't God do this? Why didn't God do that? And, one of the things I generally tend to say is, like, if you knew everything that God knew, then maybe you would probably act the same way God acted, or in your case, did not act. And that gives me comfort to so when we talk about trusting in God, I go, okay, I'm going to trust that God knows more, and God is much better than me, right? Or how they say where I'm from, gooder, right?
Gooder, yeah,
God is gooder
gooder.
than me. And if that's true, if both of those things are true, then maybe it is that God is sparing me from something, or that God is helping me in a way I can't see yet. I don't know. Again, easy to say here, but you know what? Going back to what we said earlier, this is the light.
Right.
And when the dark time comes, I can remember all this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, well, it's been fun being with you as always.
Absolutely.
And with you. Hey, we will see you next time on Coffee Conversations.